Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk, and thank you for tuning in. We have another busy docket today. First, Letecia Stauch. She is set to appear in court tomorrow afternoon. What's really going to happen? Second, an Evelyn Boswell update. Third, a Lori Vallow update. And can this thing get any more bizarre? Our dumb criminal update of the day, as well as a bonus interview for hitting 80,000 subscribers. Let's talk about it. Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk, and thank you for tuning in. If you have not already subscribed, we would please ask you to do so. Hit that little like button so you receive notifications, and always leave us a comment about what you think we've discussed today. Are we correct? Are we completely wrong? What do you think should happen to these people? Now, remember, everyone is given the presumption of innocence until proven guilty at trial or until they plead guilty. All right, first on the docket, Letecia Stauch. She is the woman charged with first-degree murder related to Gannon Stauch. He is the young Colorado Springs boy who has disappeared, and now Letecia Stauch, his stepmother, is charged with first-degree murder. She's had quite a little adventure. She had returned home to South Carolina, where she was arrested. She was ultimately extradited back to the state of Colorado. She had a little mishap in Kansas where she may have slipped out of her handcuffs and maybe assaulted a police officer. Not good. Not good, okay? Not good advice. Someone was giving her very poor advice, all right? Well, she has a court appearance in Colorado Springs tomorrow. What is going to happen? All right. Now, first, there's a bunch of reports that a lot of people want to show up and support Gannon Stauch by being in court. Obviously, anybody can go to the courtroom. It's an open courtroom. It's open to the public, and everybody can come and watch as long as they behave themselves and as long as they follow any rules imposed by the court, specifically as it relates to decorum. Additionally, the sheriff will be there making sure that nobody does anything stupid, and you're probably going to be double scanned. I really don't understand in a case like this. This is not a gang case or anything like that where you really need extra security. These type of cases are very emotional, though. A lot of people get very upset anytime a child is the victim of a crime. Well, what's going to happen? Well, not a whole lot, okay? So Ms. Stauch will appear. She will more than likely have public defenders representing her. I've seen nothing to indicate that she has retained private counsel or that her family has retained private counsel for her. I'm not aware of any conflict that would exist that would make the public defenders have to get off this particular case, whereby a private attorney to represent her would be done. And then she would have a private attorney representing at state expense. She's going to show up. She's going to be advised of the charges. This will come in the form of a complaint and information. It'll have the charge of first-degree murder. The judge will do what they call a Rule 5 advisement. It basically says that you have a right to be advised of the charges against you. You have a right to bail if it's a bailable offense, which we'll talk about in just a minute. That if there is going to be a plea or anything along those lines in the future, that you have that plea must be voluntarily made. And then ultimately it says that she has a right to counsel, and if she could not afford one, that she would be appointed counsel. Everyone who remains in custody is presumed to be indigent. You have a right to a free counsel. You could be a billionaire in custody. You still get a free attorney. So Letecia Stauch will have the public defender with her there tomorrow. The judge will say, there's this complaint and information. The attorney will more than likely state that they would waive any further reading or advisement of the charges. Because more than likely the attorney has spoken with Ms. Stauch prior to that. They know what the charges are going to be. The affidavit's been sealed, so the attorney should also, or the district attorney will file a motion to ask that the affidavit for arrest warrant be unsealed. Sometimes they get a little weird in cases like this. They don't want to disrupt their investigation, but the defendant is now entitled to see what evidence they have against her, okay? At that point, the court is going to ask both counsel how long they need to prepare for a preliminary hearing. Now, Ms. Stauch is in custody, so she has a right to a preliminary hearing within 35 days of her advisement. Now, assuming the public defenders do not have the discovery, because usually the district attorney won't turn it over until that first advisement filing of charges date, the public defender more than likely will have no idea what evidence is out there, what further investigation needs to be done along those lines. So the court will ask if they want to set it out beyond that 35 days, so the defendant will have to waive her right to that hearing within 35 days. Not that big of a deal. It will be then set for a preliminary hearing. A preliminary hearing is a screening device to determine if probable cause exists, okay? Because you have people in custody and you don't want people to be held in custody any longer if, in fact, there is not probable cause for someone to actually be there. Now, remember, probable cause is a lot lower standard than proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is required at trial. Probable cause is simply would a reasonable person believe that a crime was committed and that the defendant may have had something to do with it. Very low standard to get the proceedings started. At the preliminary hearing, the district attorney just has to present some evidence of each element of the offense charged for the case to go forward. Witnesses, they usually only have to call one witness, and that is normally the lead detective who drafted the affidavit for an arrest warrant, who took it to a judge to have him review it for probable cause, that signed it. So in most cases, preliminary hearings, you're not going to get anything out of that particular hearing. Because the detective gets up and basically regurgitates what he put in the affidavit. I can tell you, in 25 years of practicing law, and I've done hundreds of preliminary hearings, I've had one case thrown out at a preliminary hearing, and it was a shank case in a mattress in a jail where people had there's holes in the mattress and they found a shank in there, and they said my client did it, and he goes, I didn't know it was there. And I literally asked, what evidence do you have that my client knew that the shank was in the mattress? And the detective said, I don't have any. And everybody kind of looked at each other and the judge threw the case out. Only time it's ever going to happen. Oftentimes, a preliminary hearing is waived for an offer. So let's say you're charged with murder. The district attorney may say, we'll offer you second-degree murder, open sentence, 16 to 48. So the attorney will then go to the client and say, do you want to waive the preliminary hearing, that we're not going to get a whole lot out of the preliminary hearing, for this offer to remain open, kind of a good faith basis to negotiate? Doesn't mean you're going to plead guilty to it, doesn't mean you're going to accept it. It just says, hey, I know you're going to find probable cause. Let's just get this over with today. However, when it comes to first-degree murder cases, I've never waived a preliminary hearing, okay? Never, never, never on a first-degree murder case, because you never know. And literally, what do you want to do as a defense attorney? So what does Ms. Stauch's attorney want to do at a preliminary hearing? Get the detectives to talk as much as possible. Just like police officers always want to speak with a defendant, a suspect, to get them to talk. Maybe they say something out of context. Maybe it's a slip-up, a misstatement, a lie. That's what that's what the detectives want a defendant to do. So in this particular case, a defense attorney is going to say, hey, detective, tell me what you know. What evidence do you have saying that my client is guilty? Oh, really? What do you know about this? It's going to be one of the few times that a defense attorney asks open-ended questions. You just want to be a sponge, let them free flow, just do a narrative, let everything roll and let it come out, so maybe you can get something to work with down the road, okay? Now, at that preliminary hearing, I told you it's a very low standard of proof, and the legal standard is that the evidence has to be viewed in the light most favorable to the prosecution, drawing all inferences in favor of the prosecution. Now, can you see how if they present some evidence, and even if it's not great evidence. It still has to be viewed in the light most favorable to the prosecution. Why so many cases never go away at preliminary hearing. Okay, it's simply there to make sure, hey, maybe we, present some evidence that we got the right person that's charged with it. Doesn't mean either party's going to be, doesn't mean the defendant is going to be guilty at trial. It just simply means the case is going forward. Also, at that preliminary hearing, the judge will conduct what they refer to as a proof evident or presumption great hearing to determine whether Miss Stauch would be entitled to a bond. Now, the district attorney has to request this hearing. Otherwise, it is a bailable offense and a bond is to be set because everybody is entitled to a bond with very few exceptions, one being first-degree murder, if proof is evident or the presumption great. Basically, that the case is so overwhelming that they're a danger to the community and a flight risk, and that's the type of situation. So that will be done as well, and you kind of wrap that into the hearing. I have done cases where the judge has not found proof evident, presumption great, and I think the lowest bond I ever got once was $25,000 on a murder case. Now, of course, the person didn't have any money at that point, so she had to remain in custody. So it's going to be interesting to see because we don't know exactly the evidence that they have. We know that they don't have a body. So did the district attorney have a good faith basis for filing these charges as of yet? Or did maybe they get a little trigger happy since they were successful in the Patrick Frazee matter? We will have to wait and see. So that's kind of a precursor as to what is coming, but tomorrow not a whole lot should happen. Next on the docket, let's talk about Evelyn Boswell. For those of you who do not know, Evelyn Boswell is the young toddler from Tennessee, and she has gone missing. Now, very sad situation anytime a child passes away, and in these circumstances, apparently the body of Evelyn Boswell was found in an outbuilding of her grandfather's property. Megan Boswell, the mother, is in custody for false statements to the police. The whole situation just sounds like a train wreck, and the question is going to be who is ultimately charged with the murder of Evelyn Boswell. Now, the father of Evelyn Boswell, a young gentleman by the name of Ethan Perry, he is in the Air Force. He was not around because he was down in Louisiana for his service to the military when all this went down. He apparently has cooperated with the police in every way possible. And his family put out a statement today because it's sad that anybody even has to do this. First, they want people to respect their privacy, but they also want people to know that they are not asking for support or any type of donations on social media, and that if anyone is requesting such help in their name, it is completely false. So do not give money to anyone related to that, as nothing has been set up. The sheriff in Sullivan County, Tennessee, has also put out a statement that they are in complete awe of the community and the support for this young child, Evelyn Boswell. Hundreds of people have dropped off stuffed animals at the sheriff's department in memory of Evelyn Boswell, and the police have said people can continue to do that, but at some point they will ultimately turn those stuffed animals over to children either in foster care or some sort of abused home, so they won't just be discarded or thrown away. So at least something positive has come out of that matter. Next on the docket, Lori Vallow. All right. This is just turning to be into the weirdest, bizarre case around, okay? And I've had cases where you just think this can't be real. I once had a case where the detective heard a story. He couldn't believe it. He just thought it was all made up. And then he started looking and turned out it was all basically true. And that's probably the way the authorities in Idaho are feeling when it comes to the Lori Vallow matter. How many deceased people related to Lori Vallow can continue to pop up? And for those who don't know, Lori Vallow is the mother from Idaho who has been unable to provide any information as to the whereabouts of her children, JJ and Tylee, who were basically last seen in August and September of last year. Her husband passed away at the hands of her brother, who also passed away, and her new husband, Chad Daybell, has a wife that is deceased, and apparently now authorities are saying that the police were looking into Lori Vallow's brother related to the death of Chad Daybell's wife. Now, Chad Daybell's wife passed away, somewhat unexpected, did not have an autopsy conducted. Miss Daybell has now been exhumed, and the coroners are looking into trying to determine cause of death. Why do we talk about this as it relates to Lori Vallow? Well, it's interesting because, as we all know, Lori Vallow's bond was previously set at $5 million when she was arrested in Hawaii to face charges of abandonment as it related to her 2 children. She had a bond reduction hearing the other day, and her bond was reduced from $5 million to $1 million. Most people believe that her husband was going to post the $1 million bond. And as we have explained this somewhat before, but I want to do it again so it's absolutely clear because we get a lot of questions on the bonding issue. So the numbers are nice and easy and round here. So in this particular case, the bond is $1 million. Assume that the bail bondsman would want a 10% fee for his services. Hence, somebody would have to pay the bail bondsman a $100,000 fee to bond the individual out. But it's more complicated than that because the bail bondsperson wants $1 million in collateral to make sure that that person does not jump bond, because the surety, the bail bondsperson, is on the hook for that $1 million. And like all insurance companies, because most bail bondsmen, they're the guy you see on the street, but they write those bonds for an insurance company. And when does an insurance company ever really take a bad bet? They never do. So they say, fine, pay us $100,000. That's our fee because we have miscellaneous fees going throughout this process. We got to, record deeds. We got to run background checks. We got to do everything we got to do to make sure that we're secure. Then they'll want $1 million, okay? And they won't just take a house that say is worth $1 million. You have to have $1 million of equity in that. So the bail bondsman would then want to file a deed against the property so that basically there's a valid lien. So if Ms. Vallow were to get out of custody, skip bond, the insurance company would have to go to court, and the court would say, hey, your defendant skipped bond. Where's my $1 million? And he's going to say, give me time, Judge. I want to go find the defendant because I don't want to pay you the $1 million. I know you don't want the $1 million. I know you want the defendant, so give me some time to go do that. Judge may say, fine, go find her. You got 60 days. Otherwise, you got to pay. If the bail bondsman doesn't come back, he's got to pay that $1 million. Insurance companies don't like writing big checks, so they take the collateral, they sell it, and then they pay the bond. Okay? Pretty straightforward, and that's more than likely why Ms. Vallow still remains in custody as of today, now almost nearly a week since her bond reduction hearing. A couple of other things could be happening is maybe Mr. Chad Daybell no longer wants to write a check for $100,000 because he's thinking, I've already written a bunch of checks for this wife. Maybe the new shiny new toy, new car smell is rubbing off, it's kind of wearing off a little bit to the new wife, thinking, I didn't sign up for all this nonsense. I thought, it's when we were going to go to Hawaii and just have a great time. Apparently not turning out to be everything he probably thought it was. Now, these two are apparently in this organization, group, cult, whatever you want to call it, that basically thinks the world is coming to an end. I'm surprised that their other followers are not ponying up the money, the $1 million to get her out. I mean, assuming what they believe is true, it's not like they're going to need the money anyway, so go ahead and just help her bond out of jail. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But the rumor has it is that none of the bail bonds persons there are willing to take the risk because they do truly believe that she, being Lori Vallow, is a flight risk, and they don't want to have to deal with the headache of going to chase her down. So even though the court ordered GPS, obviously those can be cut off quite easily. Even if the bail bonds person orders an ankle monitor GPS as a condition of their bond, once again, quickly cut off by some heavy-duty scissors or with a simple knife. Not that big of a deal. Poof, they're gone. Who knows where they show up, if at all, ever again. It just gets weirder every day. Next on the docket, our dumb criminal contestant of the day. Our dumb criminal contestant of the day is Franz Eddie Balderin. Now, he's 23, and he sits in a hospital as a sitter. He watches people to make sure they don't climb out of bed, try to escape, anything along those lines. Well, apparently old Franz thought that for some reason he had some impulse control issues, and he thought that it'd be a good idea to go suck the toe of a patient there. Now, the woman, who is 73 years old, woke up at one point in the middle of the night and felt somebody touching her toe. She thought that it was perhaps the nurse was there to check her to see if there was any swelling in her feet. Didn't think much about it. Apparently then, old Franz comes back, and the patient sits up and sees Mr. Franz kneeling at the end of her bed, sucking her toe because she noticed it was wet. She apparently freaks out. Mr. Franz goes back to his chair, and apparently there's a screen there because there's two people in the room, and Mr. Franz, being the dumb criminal that he is, peeks around and says, "Are you okay?" Then the patient identifies Franz as the individual that was sucking her toe and promptly arrested. He now faces battery charges, and what is unclear is the fact that Franz has worked at this hospital for 4 years, if there are any other victims out there. All Mr. Franz could say was he just didn't know what came over him, but he just felt like sucking her toe. That's called impulse control, ladies and gentlemen. And for no impulse control, Franz Eddie Balderin is our dumb criminal contestant of the day. Now, finally on the docket, a bonus interview. We put a question out on social media the other day. What would you like to see, or what would you like us to do if we got to 80,000 subscribers? Who knew it was literally going to come one day from the date that we put the question up? We are so thankful for you all, and we truly appreciate it. Every day the numbers go up, I am just in complete awe, and it's not anything that I do. It's because of all of you. We are very, very humbled by all that. Well, a lot of people said, we would love to hear from a client that you represented and was acquitted, perhaps maybe for a murder charge. Well, when I first started this little podcast, I actually did that. And this gentleman's name is Leland Richardson, and he was a good guy. I liked Leland. I would consider him a friend during the course of our representation, and we actually kept in touch. He would call just to say hi and to check up on me, make sure I was doing okay. And I always told him I appreciate that, and make sure he was doing well, and he was doing really well. He came in and talked, and we were going to do it again. Unfortunately, he got sick and passed away last year due to cancer. And, it's just sad. He was a good guy, didn't have any kids, but he had a nephew, and he was very good businessman, and he made arrangements to make sure his family was taken care of. So, although this is an old interview, I still think it's a good one, and it's of a former client that was charged with first-degree murder and was found not guilty. Now, take a listen to him, and a lot of people think, if somebody's charged with murder, they've got to be guilty. Oh, they're a terrible human being. As you can see, I think it comes out that Leland Richardson was a good man. He was placed in a situation, he was accused of something, and a jury of his peers found him not guilty. So I hope you enjoy it. It's kind of a bonus feature for you all here today. It's a little long, but we'll also put a link to it as well if you want to do that as well, maybe at a later time. But I think you'll enjoy it. Have a great day. Thanks for watching Crime Talk. We have an interesting guest here today, a former client of the Reisch law firm, Leland. And Leland was in a very difficult situation through not a whole lot of series of unfortunate events that he did not necessarily plan or put himself into directly. But he was ultimately charged with first-degree murder. And after a trial, he was found not guilty. And good for him. He was able to go on and have a successful business. He already had a business prior to the charge that he had. He nearly lost everything while he was sitting in custody. And since then, he's never been in trouble since, not even a speeding ticket. But he's continued to grow his business, and now he's going to deal with some other life events going on right now. But Leland, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking, Scott.
All right. So what I want to talk about, and maybe you can really bring this in for people to understand, is I think most people, if they get in trouble in the criminal justice system, it's probably a traffic ticket or something along those lines. And here you were, somebody that had a couple of minor brushes with the law, but no big deal. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're being charged with first-degree murder, looking at spending the rest of your life in prison for something that you and I both knew you didn't do. What was going through your head? Let's kind of just start from the beginning. Like, you're there, and next thing you know, there's a dead body. What was going through your head?
Right. Well, initially, it is very surreal. Everything in the beginning just tended to just slow down. Your life literally just stops. And of course, the natural reaction is to want to attain attorney. Emotionally, you want to know, why you're going through this. Why is this happening to me? What did I do? And what a lot of people tend to do is they want to get it resolved quickly.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, they want it to go away tomorrow. And I think that a lot of times when you're locked up or you're under suspicion or you're being charged with something, you're looking for an attorney or a person that's just going to sort of wave that magic wand and make this go away. And so those are those are a lot of the emotions that come up in the beginning. At least for me, is this, I was like, who can fix this? Who can save me? Who can make this go away? And it just doesn't unfold. That's just not simply the reality, and it just doesn't unfold that way.
And that's interesting. Obviously, your first thought or reaction, I think you said, was get an attorney.
Right.
Right? And I think when we first spoke, your initial reaction was, well, I need to go in there and tell them what happened. And
Correct.
I think I told you, not if you want me to represent you or something to that effect, right?
Absolutely, right.
Because we were still investigating the case.
Right.
We were trying to figure out what was going on.
Right.
And I still remember your case. I remember literally sitting in bed on a Sunday morning, and they had news crews out at this particular scene. And I remember my first thought, as criminal defense attorney, is, maybe I'll get that case.
Right.
And you ultimately came, and we talked, and you retained me. And I remember turning you in at the jail and letting everybody know, you have an attorney. Do not talk to my client. Right?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Is you met me there. And you wanted to let the people that were taking me into custody, that I was retained, and that no one was allowed to question or talk to me in any sort of capacity about my case, and in anything related to this case. And you're pretty stern about that, and I really appreciate it because it wasn't a situation where it's like, well, Lee, you got to turn yourself in sooner or later. It was just like, Lee, the faster you get in there, the faster we can get the ball rolling. If you need me to come in there and turn you in myself, I'll go with you and walk you through this. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, we walked from day one. We walked through this entire process together and walked out together.
Yeah. And I told you to keep your mouth shut.
Yep.
And it's not going to get resolved overnight, right?
That's exactly what was said.
And when I'm telling you to keep your mouth shut, that kind of went against your natural instinct of, well, I want to tell my side of the story, right?
Right. And, you know, there was a lot of people implicated and stuff, and you want to help other people and you want to get the story straight. And like you said, it was in the media, so a lot of the media had the story completely convoluted. It was not the truth. And you kind of want to get to the source of the rumor and try to dissolve the rumor as best you can. And I knew better than to go and talk to the police and just say, hey, I didn't do it or anything like that. But there is protocol when it comes to that, because when they say what you say can be held against you in a court of law, they mean exactly that.
And what they really should say is anything you say can be used against you, misconstrued, taken out of context, and completely twisted. Exactly.
They can play on words, and so it's a wide range of. You have to be really careful about what you say. So it's best to have someone to say it for you. And Scott really it sort of embedded that in my brain. Is just like, let me do the talking. And because what I also learned, like going through the process of going through the trial, is just because it's in the paperwork, or just because it's in your discovery, or just because the police say one thing or the district attorney say one thing, doesn't necessarily make it true, and it doesn't necessarily make it evidence. It's a story, and a lot of times, especially other defendants and people that I've learned and met along the way, they just automatically say, well, if it's written down, it must be true. I could be convicted of this, or they're going to paint a picture as if I'm guilty because of what the documents say. And you know the truth, and you know what transpired, and you know what you did and did not do. So you got to kind of stick to your guns and let someone tell your story for you. And it doesn't mean that you're innocent or guilty. It's just that in a court of law, it's that's exactly what it is. There's you are protected by the Constitution. And a lot of times you take away your rights by saying or doing too much.
I mean, you have a right to remain silent.
Exactly.
Why would you give up your right unless you're going to get something in exchange for that?
Exactly. You do have the right to remain silent. You don't have to speak to anyone but your attorney. And why would you give up that right? And what I like about Scott is that he's good at teaching you about the Constitution and about the law and about the process as we go. And I think a lot of times defendants get a little frustrated because they don't know what's going on. And a part of that is because attorneys don't exactly relay that message. Some can be, you could be a number to some of these attorneys. And so me and Scott, I feel like we worked good as a team, even though I was the defendant and he was defending me, is that we were able to communicate, and he was able to, and I felt like I was teachable and I could learn and I could understand what the process is, and that really helped me to develop the patience as best I can because I'm facing a life-altering situation. So,
well, and I think as I recall it, I never went in there and said, other than you're going to keep your mouth shut.
Right.
I never said, I know everything, you don't know anything.
Right.
And so you just need to do whatever I tell you to do.
Wasn't condescending at all. He just says, Lee, the less you say, the better chance we have. And I think that's really true, and I think that's okay with saying that. A lot of times by you saying things, and the police and the district attorney aren't on your side. It's just what it is, and they're looking to paint a different type of picture. Not how much, it doesn't matter the background you have, your family background, and you have good upbringing and good ethics and good morals. They are trying to make you into something totally different. And so you do want to speak to the people that are really, truly, genuinely on your side, and that is going to be your attorney and the team around you. It could be even misconstrued of talking to family members. cellmates.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I told you when you go into custody, you're not going to talk to anybody. You're not going to talk to the detectives. You're going to go through booking. You're going to tell them your name, rank, and serial number, so to speak.
Right.
And that's the extent of it. But I also, tell you, like I tell every client, don't talk about the facts of your case with your cellmate, your family members over the phone, because those are all recorded and downloadable these days.
Right.
And so really, here you are in an environment where everybody in there has their own story, and everybody wants to know their own story. And sometimes there's people in there that want to use it for their own advantage. How difficult was that not to talk to somebody or say, hey, man, look at my discovery or anything like that?
Naturally, when you have a lot of emotions, so you're looking to vent to anybody that's wanted to listen, especially if you feel like you're innocent. You do want to talk to your mother or your brother or even your cellmate. Some people get closer to cellmate and say, hey, man, I don't deserve to be here. This is the circumstances. What's in here is not true. This is the truth. And you get all of those feelings. And, it takes a lot of discipline and to not say anything. And when I tell you they pulled out all the stops throughout the process, they truly did. They talked to other inmates to see if I had a story to tell. They pulled up every phone record I had for the 14 months that I were in there.
I remember that. They never give me a disc if it's
right.
They have to turn it over if they save
right.
it, but when they being the government, the prosecution,
right.
the investigators. But normally there's something on there that's bad.
Right.
And in your particular case, I remember listening to all your phone calls,
right.
and you never brought up your case other than maybe your court appearance.
Right.
And so you did listen. You listened.
Absolutely. Because you want to give yourself a chance. And it's not about suppressing the truth or hiding something. This is really just protecting your right. And then, I didn't want anything to get misconstrued or taken out of context. And so, it's not a sign of guilt because you want to keep your mouth shut. It's just that you want to be able to tell the right story, and you want your story to be told the way you want it to be told. And you don't want it to be misconstrued or misinterpreted in any kind of way, and that's what they look to do. So
let's talk a little bit about the fact when you're sitting there in custody and, obviously, you hadn't been in trouble. You had a successful business going at the time, various other
right.
ventures and what have you. And all of a sudden, here you are sitting in a, 6x8 cell, maybe
right.
a little bit larger, maybe a cellmate, maybe not. And, it's not like you can go home and see the family, go to work, talk
right.
about what's going on. What kind of feeling is that sitting there basically waiting? Because obviously from the time you turned yourself in till the time your case was resolved was about a year, right?
Yeah, it's 14 months.
14 months.
Yeah.
Because when you get arrested, you got to get discovery, do some investigation, set it for a preliminary hearing,
right.
arraignment, then they set a trial date, and that'll
right.
got to continue. What's it like waiting, so to speak?
Well, in the beginning, you want to quit. At the beginning, you're just, I would be lying to say, you don't want to wake up in the morning. You want to quit. It's very emotional in the sense of, in my situation, I have a lot of people that depend on me because I do run a business. I am college educated, and a lot of people rely on me. And so this was also very embarrassing because in my community, my reputation was everything. So I was very concerned about my reputation. I was embarrassed, and I really wanted to just crawl up in a hole and die, especially because I knew the details of the case and what was being sort of fabricated it was extremely exaggerated on what transpired and what happened. And so believe it or not, I felt like I was a victim of circumstances. So in my situation in the beginning was just, you really just want to escape, you want to die, you want to quit, you don't, and it's very difficult to accept your circumstances in the beginning. It's depressing, and it can be very overwhelming, and it get almost to the point where it can make you sick.
Okay. Well, we got along pretty well.
Yeah.
And obviously we get along pretty well now, even some almost 10 years later.
Yeah.
But, we had our bumps along the road, did we not? I mean, you were frustrated that why is it taking so long?
Right.
Isn't it obvious that I didn't do anything? Why are they not dismissing this case? What kind of a lawyer are you?
Right.
What are you doing for me?
Right.
I seem to recall in having some of those conversations, right?
Yes.
Now, looking back, I understand when you're there, you want to get it done.
Right.
You want to get it resolved. Why is it taking so long? I didn't do anything.
Right.
I need to get out of here.
Right.
Is that just frustration of, being there? Like you said, your reputation, because it was in the newspaper. Every time we went to court, you were mentioned in court.
Right.
And they usually got it wrong. I always wonder when you see something read in the paper and you read it and you think, were they at the same hearing that I was attending? Because that's not what happened at all.
Exactly.
And so, like I said, there's frustration. You talk about the loneliness, but, obviously I wasn't rushing down there every day to, give you a pat on the back and say everything's going to be okay. I'm pretty much, I'll come see you when we need to talk. But
exactly.
Was that part of the frustration?
It is, because what you see from a defendant's point of view is time, the days and the time slow down. So when you're sitting there and you're faced with them sort of circumstances, it was an issue of you have all day, every day to think about where you're at and why you're there. And so a day to us seems like a week. A day to us as civilians seems like a week as a defendant or an inmate. And so you just sit and you think, and it almost can just, it drives you crazy, because you're sitting there and you're just basically watching the second hand and wondering, when am I going to come out of this, or when am I going to get an answer or a result? And so the frustrating part is, and a lot of attorneys don't really, probably have a hard time putting this in perspective, is no information is bad information. So when we're not keep up to breast about things and what's going on and how the politics play in the courtroom, when you're a defendant and you're not really sure how the politics play out and why we're setting things over and why does the process take so long, it gets very frustrating. And then you start to have sort of this conspiracy attitude that everybody's against you.
And that your attorney must be a part of this.
And your attorney's a part of it. And your attorney doesn't care about you, or he's too busy working another case, or he, it's just one of those things. Like, the best way I can convey it is that you really want your attorney to personalize it. And sometimes it got very difficult. I mean, Scott is, he has other cases, of course, but I do remember one thing that kind of resonated with me when I first retained him was he was like, Lee, I can't guarantee you anything. I can't guarantee you an outcome. I can't guarantee you how this is going to unfold. The only thing that I can guarantee is I'm going to work my butt off for you. And he was very resolute when he said it, and that's exactly what happened at the end. But what you don't see is, what you do see is you see the district attorney and all of the assistants and the judges and the court reporter being sort of the busybodies. And your attorney is kind of sort of the one who just kind of just sitting there, retaining all of the information, getting all of the study, coming up with the strategy. And, Scott never really explained his strategy, but he certainly had one. But because that strategy may change from day to day, week to week, month to month, depending on how
depending on the information, right?
So at one point, we went up to court one time, and the district attorney was all fire and brimstone. He just looked lively in there, and he just looked like full of spirit. And, I mean, just his body language alone and the way he spoke, it almost sounded like he was sure he had this conviction. And Scott just kind of laid back and absorbed and took in the information, and he said things when he needed to, but he didn't necessarily put on a show like you would see on a television show. I didn't see, you want to see that out of your attorney. You want to see fire and brimstone and yelling objections and things like that, and that's just simply not the case. And so this is the first time I'd never forget it, because it was the first time I got upset at Scott, and I was just like, I wrote him a letter, and I was just like, man, you look shiftless in there. And I think that was the expression that I used.
So, but looking back now, do you see it more as it's almost like playing cards. You don't want them to see it. Like, don't let them see you sweat.
You can't let them see
I don't care what you're saying. It doesn't matter. Prove it.
Exactly. And, of course, you're the one on the hot seat and you're the defendant. So, it's hard to accept that, right then and there. But looking back at it, that's exactly what happened. And, Scott came and he was prepared with the one heck of a game plan. And I was even scared. And what made me nervous is the first day of court, you have 2 district attorneys. And I wasn't expecting that. And, I kind of looked at Scott like, well, should we have 2 attorneys? Because it's 2 of them.
I think you couldn't afford it, right?
Probably not. But I remember the private investigator says, Lee, that doesn't really matter. And he actually spoke very highly of Scott. And he said, at the end of the day, I don't know how to explain it, Lee, but, when it comes to the judge, the district attorney, and everybody in this room, Scott's the smartest person in this room.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
But that comes from Danny, the investigator. Is exactly how he explained it to me. But I couldn't see really the game plan. And so I thought that they were just going to sort of bully my attorney, so to speak. And it just wasn't the case.
Was that one of the first times we were in court, like for a preliminary hearing? I don't recall that exactly, but when you went to court, you're in shackles, you're sitting there in a little green or orange jumpsuit that they have down there in Arapahoe, I think it is, and what's it like seeing your family's showing up and you're shackled and you got belly chains on you and ankle? I mean, what's that feeling like?
You feel depleted, and again, I'm a very prideful man, and I work hard for what I have, and you do feel depleted, and it's embarrassing, and you really, in my case, I really didn't want family members and friends there, because when you're faced with those sort of charges and circumstances, you look like a monster to other people, even to certain family members, and they read the papers and look at the news just as we do, and it's like, they look at it, and if it's in the paper, it must be true. If it's on television, then it must be true. You're a monster. And especially with the sort of charge that I have, and it was actually first-degree / felony murder, which carried life without parole. And, your family members, or even friends or even associates are like, well, what did you do? You're not in here for any reason. And not being able to
you didn't get here. You didn't get here for not doing something, right?
You didn't get here
it
for not
could just be
doing
wrong
something.
place, wrong time.
Exactly. And I remember my cousin coming to visit me, and he was asking me all these questions. I was like, you gotta stop asking me questions. And he just was like, Leland, what do you have to hide? And it's like, and it's hard to explain and defend yourself when you're faced with those sort of charges, and as embarrassing as those charges are. And you're knowing you're innocent. And I even had a co-defendant that was innocent, and I even had an alibi. And I felt bad for him. And I remember telling Scott, I was like, Scott, he's innocent. Like, what do we do? How can we help him? And I'm trying to help everybody, and it was tough.
I tell clients all the time that when you get in a situation like this, that you truly find out who your friends are.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, all your friends and people from, wherever, were they putting money on your books? Were they coming by to see you? Or was it just a few people here and there?
I come from a very strong, I have a very strong reputation in the community. And so I felt very supported in that regard. But I tell you, 99% of the people that were in there did not have that family support. They didn't have the money in their books. A lot of them were indigent. A lot of them, just to survive, would have to gamble or barter in some kind of way in order to just be able to sustain their daily activities in there. The food isn't as great, so you have to have supplemental food or sort of income in there in order to just simply live and maintain. And I did have a business, and I did have a strong family background, so I was able to wing through it at the time. But my situation was very rare, because that's just not the case 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. And so, like I said, no one was contributing to your defense fund, because as
No.
I recall,
No.
you ran out of money.
Yeah, we ran out of money.
I had to ask the court to
Yeah,
pay me basically to do the trial.
right.
And I stayed on. I, probably would have done it regardless of, but it's nice to get paid a little something instead of working for free.
Right.
But, I mean, that's a process. I mean, you still have obligations on the outside, trying to help people, your family, things of that, business, try to keep it afloat. I remember you were trying to do that.
Yeah. I lost my house in the process. I lost a lot of assets during the time of this process. The only thing that I was able to hang on to by the thread of my teeth was my business, which wasn't generating very much income at the time because, of course, I was incarcerated. But yeah, Scott came up with the plan, and once I ran out of money, he was able to make some adjustments and go to the court and obtain more funding. And, forever grateful for that.
Yeah. So your particular case, I use this as an example. I still have attorneys come up to me and say, man, I remember that case, murder case, and you didn't file any motions. Because I think that was another discussion that we had, which was, well, how come you're not filing those motions? Where's that motion to dismiss?
Right.
And I'm like, well,
the infamous motion to dismiss.
Right.
Yeah, it's not there. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, you didn't make a statement, so we have no motions to suppress.
Right.
It's pretty much factually based.
Right.
I got what I need. They're not going to bring in 404B evidence. They've told me that. They didn't file any notice of it.
Right.
And so each case is different. Looking back now, you've probably realized that I got a homicide case where I don't file any motions, and I could have a routine DUI, and I could have 5 motions or more.
Right.
It just depends on the cases. But that goes back to the whole point where you just being informed of what's going on, right?
Right.
And but that's tough. I mean, sitting there thinking 14 months in custody, not knowing, you have court dates, but in between, what's my attorney doing? I mean, I think we tried to fill you in the best we could.
Right.
I know Danny, the investigator, went down to,
Right.
talk with you. I would come down and, let you know, hey, this is what's going on. And a lot of times they're like, it's not factually complex.
Right.
We're saying you had nothing to do with anything. And ultimately, they couldn't even show that you were there, once it came to trial. So, there wasn't like, what else should I be doing?
Right.
All right, so we're back, and still talking to Leland about his case that he had almost some 10 years ago. And where we left off was kind of that unknown feeling of what's going on. You keep saying there's a strategy, like you didn't think there was a strategy.
Right.
But oftentimes, it kind of changed literally because they had a witness that they said they were going to have, and they didn't.
Right.
And that changed the whole complexion of everything about a week before trial. Do you recall that?
I do recall that. I also recall at one point you were even considered putting me on the stand.
Yeah.
And that changed.
Well, let's talk about that. So as you started getting closer to trial, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but I don't think there was ever even an offer made in your particular case, or maybe it was like 48 years or 60 years or something ridiculous.
I think there was an offer made, but it was just like, something just absolutely it was something crazy.
Yeah, and so it's like
I think it was 30 years.
Yeah. So think about it. Had you taken that deal, you'd still have a minute, before you're even eligible for parole. Well, 30, I guess you'd maybe just about be eligible for parole these days.
Right.
Maybe getting close.
Probably have another 6 years.
Probably another 6 years. Think about all the stuff you've done over the last
9 to 10 years. It's been a ride.
Yeah. So obviously we went to trial. As you got closer to trial, what was that like? Is that an emotional roller coaster? I've had other clients describe it as a complete emotional roller coaster. I can tell you, for the attorney, as you get closer to trial on something serious as a murder case, where attorneys, I know a lot of people think, the attorneys, they don't care about me. They're just going to get paid and whatever.
Right.
But I can tell you from the attorney perspective, it's stressful. Okay?
Absolutely.
You, as the attorney, we make a lot of the decisions. We decide what questions to ask, what witnesses to call, the strategy, the defenses. Because as the defendant, you have, who my attorney's going to be,
right,
whether I'm going to take a deal or not,
right,
and whether you testify at trial. Those are your big questions. Obviously, you assist and you review the discovery and make points and suggestions. But I don't think people realize it, particularly people in custody. They think, my attorney doesn't care about me. He's just thinking about getting paid.
Right.
And I can tell you, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And when you realize that the questions that you ask or don't ask, or how you present a question, could be the decision that a juror hangs their hat on. What was that answer? Did it come out okay? Should it have been attacked? Should you have gone after that? And people don't realize when you're a trial attorney, you have in literally a split second to think, all right, the DA is asking a question. So by the time I have to anticipate what he's going to ask, listen to it, process it, all the information that I already know about the case, how does this fit into the larger strategy of the case? Is it objectionable? Should I object? Or if it is objectionable, does it help me for strategic reasons? Should I not object to it? And then decide how that fits in the big picture, all in the matter of seconds. Okay?
Right.
It can be stressful to the attorney. I know at the end of the day of trial, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I remember you looking over at me, I think after the first day of maybe jury selection, which was, man, I'm exhausted.
It is mentally draining, and looking back at it, Scott, and watching you perform was, you definitely had your game face on. So it is mentally draining because you're the one. The reality is like no matter if you're guilty or innocent, when you're faced with that sort of charge in the court of law, and we know that there's the politics, racism, prejudices all play a role in that sort of arena, and you being African American. That is our reality, is that we don't just walk away from situations like that. And so when trial started, the reality was at that time is I'm not ever going home. They're going to find some way, somehow to keep me here. And I'll be honest with you, it was even after the verdict and I went back to my cell and they were processing me out, I still felt somehow they were going to call me back and say, well, we have new charges.
I remember you telling me that concern.
Yeah,
are you sure there's nothing else that this is really
or
over?
Something else was going to pop up, or
they're not going to charge me with felony acquittal.
Exactly. And even the deputies were like, man, I've never seen anything like that before. And so I didn't think that I was walking out of those doors until they actually opened up. And
so let's talk about jury. Okay. The county that you resided in is very diverse. It involves several counties, several cities within the county. You've got Aurora, which is very diverse.
Right.
You have Arapahoe County, the farther south side, which includes, very upscale neighborhoods, Centennial, right. Cherry Creek, Cherry Hills, a lot of money.
Right.
Okay. And very law and order type people.
Right.
Which is fine. But what was going through your head when you saw that potential jury pool sit there? I don't remember seeing a whole lot of African American faces sitting in that jury pool.
To think of it, Scott, I don't think there was one.
Yeah.
There was no African Americans, and somehow we have it in our minds that if there's an African American on the jury, that he's relatable, he or she is relatable, and sometimes that could be the opposite. It's just like if it's an African American, he wants to show that he's no longer or nowhere near associated with you in any sort of kind of way that, other than our skin color, we don't have anything in common. So it could have an adverse effect, and they want nothing to do with you, or don't compare me to him. And we have a big problem with that amongst our community and our ethnicity, that we sometimes we like to separate ourselves from the good blacks and the bad blacks, so to speak.
Sure.
But it was a little daunting to know that my entire jury was white, because politics, as we know it, play a role in the outcome of a lot of verdicts. We're not the biggest prison population for no reason.
Sure. And so going back in that, I have lots of clients who are African American, or they're Hispanic, and they have their jury trial coming up, and they're like, well, I want black jurors, I want this, and
Right.
And I tell them oftentimes, I don't think you want that.
Right.
Because, like you said, not to separate kind of the good people and the bad people.
Right.
But it's, they sit there, they're doing their jury duty, and they're saying, you know what? I've got my entire life, some 50, 60 years. I've had hardship. I've had diversity, racism, dealt with it.
Exactly.
And I've never got myself in trouble.
Right.
And frankly, I think they're harder on their own race because they're holding themselves to the standard that they perceive.
Right.
And I find that even if you have a female defendant, you don't want female jurors because females, they will judge
right.
Up and down and, criticize, oh, she's wearing that outfit today. They're harsh, but,
right.
Sometimes I don't think necessarily having a complete, racial juror of your peers is necessarily a good thing. My experience is none of them say, I'm going to find him guilty or not guilty because, they're African American or they're Hispanic
right.
or they're white. Jurors, I think, take their jobs very seriously. This is probably one of the most important things that they've ever done in their life. And they realize, particularly in a homicide, first-degree murder case, that this is not, a DUI where you're going to get probation. We're talking
right.
serious consequences.
And I think Scott, that comes down to actually, if you do have a good trial attorney, because from what I experienced and what I had seen is that the trial attorney really has to explain to the jurors how important their job really is. This is nothing that, you have to take a lot of your opinions and emotions and a lot of different elements out of the picture and just look at the facts. Mm-hmm. And I think the attorneys in our team, did a good job of explaining that to the jurors, like, I think even when at one point you said if the facts are there and it shows that Mr. Richards isn't guilty, then find him guilty. I remember you specifically saying that at one point. But you were saying if the facts are not there, then it's your job to find him not guilty based on the facts. Yep. This has nothing to do with race, color, ethnicity, size, or anything. And I remember you specifically saying that when they were handed their during closing arguments. But Scott, I don't. In our demographic and in my situation, race didn't play a factor, and I think there was a good job of showing me as a human being, and not just this, big black African American scary killer, so to speak. He has a family that he takes care of. He has a job that he runs. He's active in the community, and I think that kind of helps soften the approach as to looking at me as a human being rather than some sort of statistic. I don't necessarily think that may apply in every demographic. If you were in Philadelphia or, Charlotte,
Sure, there's obviously,
but in middle class is very diverse in Colorado. It's fairly liberal, and I think in my situation, people really looked at it fairly objectively. And I don't know if you remember this, Scott, but there was only one question about one charge, and we weren't sure which way that bounced.
Jury questions are the worst because you never know what that means.
What they're thinking. They had a question about one charge, and they wanted to get a little bit more detailed about that one particular charge, so that I think that's had the hair standing up on the back of everyone's neck.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it. The jury. I still think the selection of the jury is the most important part of any trial because they call that process voir dire.
Right.
You get to question them, and
right.
Coincidentally is the name of this podcast, voir dire. But it's it means to speak the truth. And I always tell jurors, tell me the truth.
Right.
Don't tell me the politically correct answer. Don't tell me the answer you think I want to hear, what the judge wants to hear. What do you think? Because it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good juror, or it doesn't mean you're a good person or a bad person. It just simply means maybe this isn't the right trial for you.
Right.
And I've found over the years, if I can get those jurors to say, it's okay, he's honest, he's being honest with me, because I want to let him to know, win, lose, or draw at the end of the trial, I at least want to know I had a fair shot. Right. But if you have a bias or a prejudice that is going to make it where I don't even have a shot out of the gate,
right,
it's not a fair process at that point.
Right.
And that's all you can really ask for, because let's face it, the jurors that we like, the district attorney will usually get rid of those. The jurors that the district attorney loves, we're going to get rid of them. And then we're stuck really with this kind of in between. We're not sure where they're going to go, but we hope they take their job seriously, because you only get, I think the judge gave us maybe an hour, to interview some 75 potential jurors, which isn't long when you're talking about a case where someone's liberty for the rest of their life is at stake.
Right. And I think that's one thing that I liked about when we did the jury selection, is that you explained to them that it was their patriotic duty, almost like it was a privilege to be able to be served on this jury, and when you made it seem so patriotic, I think I was looking forward to jury duty.
This is one of the first,
yeah,
and one of the few countries in the world where you get a right to a jury trial.
Yeah.
In most countries, it's still made before the decision is made before the process starts.
Right.
And so, to think about it, that we trust 12 random citizens from all different backgrounds and different ways of life, jobs, employment, economic situations.
Right.
And guess what? Their one vote counts exactly the same, depending on whether they got a PhD or they barely graduated from high school, whether they make $1 million or they got $10 in their checking account, and it's a total hardship. If you think about the trust that our founding fathers put in the jury system, it's amazing, and it works. Most of the time, the jury gets it correct, because I do believe that the jury takes their job seriously. If you think about it, we go to court all the time. As Matt and I were attorneys, we go to court, we see juries all the time.
Right.
Some people are like, oh, it's jury duty, this is a pain in the butt. They should be saying, man, I want to be here. It's an inconvenience, but that man over there with the defendant on his table, that could be me someday, or a family member. And
you don't want to do it until you're actually in that situation where you need a jury.
And that's the thing.
And you want, as a defendant, I can tell you want the jury to take it serious. You want them to pay attention to everything that's being presented, especially if you feel like you're innocent. Even if you feel like you're guilty, you still want them to pay attention and look at you and see you as a human being. And
everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story.
Well, I can tell you that as a defense attorney, Scott and I are probably never going to actually end up on a criminal jury. But I would love to be part of that. It would be so thrilling,
right,
to get that privilege to serve on a criminal jury that I'll probably never get to do.
And I think I'd be a great juror. I think I would listen to the evidence and, hey, reasonable doubt, or nope. They proved it.
Right.
And that's all I tell people, ladies and gentlemen, it is your oath and obligation.
Right.
If you think the prosecution has proven their case, find them guilty. That's the way the system works.
Right.
But on the same token, if you don't think that they've proven their case, it's your oath and obligation to say not guilty. And that's the way the system works. And juries every day in the state of Colorado, across the country, in both state and federal municipal court, find people guilty every day. Yeah. Okay? It's not I can't believe we're doing this. It happens, and that's the way it's supposed to work. Now, there's still more guilties than there are not guilties, but that's also the way it's kind of set up to work. It's kind of stacked against you, so to speak,
I wish more African Americans who are in a situation where, when they get in trouble and things of that nature, I think, and it's just as being me, as being black, I would love to see more of them take their cases to trial. Because certain times, certain situations are exaggerated. And I would love to see them, but it's the fear. And I think it's a combination of, of oppression. I think it's a combination of a lack of education. I think it's they're not familiar with the courtroom or the attorney, and it's definitely the money. As my brother over here is pointing out, they don't have the resources or the finances to go to trial, and it's just simply unfortunate. And I think that's why it's so important that if you're in a situation and you do have an attorney, that the attorney does as best he can to make it as personable as he can. Because that is the overall consensus, is that he doesn't care about me. I'm just a statistic.
It's a trust thing.
It's a trust thing. He's just a folder. Even if he doesn't have a shot in hell of making it work or getting you out, or you're on your 5th DUI or you're on your 7th felony or whatever the case is, still try to make it as personable as you can. It's like, no, I'm here for you. I'm going to fight for you as best I can.
Yeah.
But I got to be honest with you. And I think sometimes attorneys are so quick to plead out, and that's sort of the norm that goes on when you're in the county jail. It's like, oh, they just want to plead everybody out. Their caseload is full. They want to clear their caseload. And, that's just a bad, and that's unfortunate, but it's a reason they think that way. And if I were to give any advice to any attorney, is to try to eliminate that as much as possible, is to convey to your client that, no, I'm really here. We're really going to fight this thing if there's room to fight.
Yeah. So going back to your trial, I remember there was a twist near the end where they weren't able to, I think, bring in some records or something along those lines. And although I think you were prepared to testify, I think it was the last minute, game time, 4th quarter, 30 seconds left on the play clock, we decided, or you decided ultimately, but listening to the advice of me,
4th and 9,
to not testify.
Right.
Now, obviously there's no do-overs in that situation. Was that a scary process? I mean, here you are, waiting some now 14 months, waiting to tell your story, and then all of a sudden your attorney's saying, I don't think you need to testify. I don't think they've made their case of proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that's about as basically how you put it to me, and I was okay with that decision. I was prepared as much as I can to testify, but my attitude, by day 2, day 3, my attitude is like I have nothing to lose. So if that was going to be the last sort of Hail Mary that I get up there and I testify, then so be it. There was a lot of charges. Initially it was 13 charges, and one of them would have got me life without parole. And then by the time the jury got their instructions, it dwindled to 9 charges. So if I was not guilty on 8 and I got found guilty on the 9th charge, it was life without parole because the circumstances of the charges was felony murder. Mm-hmm. And so we had to pretty much beat every charge.
They literally had to believe whether you were there or not.
Yeah.
Is what it came down to.
Yeah.
And, that decision of, do I testify or do not testify, how hard of a decision was that?
It was, I still haven't made that decision. If I would have been okay with doing it or not. But like I said, it was like, I took the advice of my counsel. He said, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think we need to get up there. But legally, and if you do happen to get up there, I trust and believe that you can represent yourself very well. And I took to that, and he didn't think that it was necessary to do it. So, part of, like we said in the beginning, part of it's trust. So you have to have, the attorney has to be able to trust that you're telling him everything that he needs to know. And the defendant and the client has to be able to trust that the attorney really is there working for you on your behalf.
Yeah, we talked earlier about how stressful it is for attorneys in a case.
Yeah.
That is one of the most stressful decisions, because what if I made the wrong decision? What if I gave the wrong advice?
Right.
It's a tactical decision. You're making the best decision you can at the time, seeing what the jurors are thinking, their reactions, their body language, how's the evidence presenting, stuff that doesn't read if you just read a transcript.
Right.
So you have to kind of be there in the moment thinking, I don't think you've proven it, and you can't tell from the jurors, right? They're not saying, holding up scorecards like, oh, that question was an 8, that was a 9, a little too much splash, it's a 6.
You don't get any do-overs, and there's no, you can't rewind it, and so it unfolds right in front of your eyes as is. I'm sure the district attorney would love to get a do-over, and it did bounce, the ball didn't bounce his way, and you're exactly right. And so it was really scary, man. And I remember when we all finally rest and we were waiting on the verdict to come in. Scott, I don't know if you remember this, man, but you were shaking. and I remember asking you, and I remember telling you, Scott, no matter what the verdict is and how it come out, I'm glad you represented me, and you know, I'm very impressed on the performance that you gave, and I feel confident that I was represented in the right way. And all that sound good, but he said at the end, he said, Lee, then they didn't prove it. They didn't prove it. And I think Scott said at one point, he's like, Lee, I'll quit the bar. I'll quit the practice if they found you guilty on this case. He's like, and he didn't even look at me. He's just like, you know, he just kept shaking his head and rocking back and forth. He's like, they just didn't prove it. And that showed me right then and there that he gave me all the blood, sweat, and tears and all the information and all. He pulled out all the stops to, you know, and Danny and Lindsay, who were the private investigators on the case too, they were very vested, and I think they liked me, you know, and so I think that helped, you know, and so you know, I feel so blessed, you know, and I tell people all alike, like, he really, truly, genuinely saved my life.
So obviously the jury was out.
Yeah.
I think they asked one or two questions, not many.
Right.
But of course, you never know exactly what each question means. Ultimately, jury comes out. I think they had a stand. I can't remember if this judge did. But they read the verdict. And I remember thinking, well, if it's not guilty on the first one or guilty, it's going to be guilty or not guilty all the way down. No splitting the babies. They either believed it or they didn't.
No, they didn't, right.
And they went through, and it was all not guilties. And I think I remember you reaching over and, like, hugging me or something. I'm like, hold on. We're not done all the way yet.
Right. We got down to the eighth charge, and the celebration kicked in, and you know hugs and kisses, but they went. So what's scary is, you know, Leland Richardson versus the state of Colorado. We find a defendant on the charges of first-degree murder. And I mean, it's just long and drawn, and it's just really scary. And so you're just sitting there. You know,
and I don't think we asked for
at this point.
I don't think we asked for any lesser included. I think we were thinking they either believe it or they don't.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
I think they went to second degree on the lesser included.
Okay, maybe that's.
Yeah, I think they went to second degree and for the lesser included charge at that point. And it felt like it took an hour to read that verdict. And by the time we got to the eighth one, we were confident that we won. And so. I think even Scott at that point, still in the eighth charge, he was like, "No, wait." And,
don't get too excited yet. Yeah. They got more to go.
Yeah, right.
As soon as you start celebrating, you'll get some bad news.
Yeah,
exactly right. And so, I don't even think I even remember hearing the last not guilty charge.
And I can't remember exactly because it's been so long and done a lot of trials in between. But I can't remember if your family was able to make it back for the verdict because I remember.
My immediate family was there: mom, my mother, father, brother, my nephew, and stuff. But there was a lot of family members there.
Okay, I couldn't recall. Sometimes there were, there's not much time to get the verdict because they don't want to hold the jurors up.
Right, because it was quick.
Yeah, and because they want to get people along their way.
Right.
And
it was 2.5 hours. Once the jury got their instruction, it was 2.5 hours to come up with a verdict.
Which is pretty quick verdict for a homicide case with 9 charges ultimately submitted to them. So that was well for you.
Yeah, I remember going back to my cell and laying down and literally getting ready to doze off, and they're like, "Oh, they got the verdicts in, let's go." And I'm like, "What?"
Remember what I told you? You said, I get this question quite a bit, like, what's the worst part? I'm like, this waiting is the second worst part of a trial.
Yes.
Waiting.
Yeah.
The worst part is when they say, we have a verdict.
Right.
And you, like, is it going to be 5 minutes? Is it going to be 15? Are we waiting for families from victims to arrive? Is it going to be an hour and 50 minutes?
Right.
And you're just like, it's just the worst.
It's the worst.
And,
and getting that question, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that mean? Yeah.
And so you're there. Obviously, you were found not guilty. Never been in any trouble since.
Right.
What was that like when, obviously you're still in custody at that point, so they have to process you out. So they still put you in shackles, right?
Yeah, they put you in shackles. You go, as a matter of fact, you go back to your cell, and they give you lunch, and you're still an inmate. And as a matter of fact, I remember this distinctly. It ended at 4:00, so we got our verdict in by 4. And I wasn't processed and released till 7 o'clock later on that night. So you still have those 3 hours where it was just dreadful. Still, it was so, it was surreal. I didn't believe it until the doors opened up and it was still kind of light outside because it was July. But, you know, and I got a little angry. I have to be honest with you. I was very angry because, you know, it was one of those things like I felt blessed and I'm glad I was going home, but I also felt, a part of me felt like it shouldn't even gone that far. And so to go home and pick up the pieces and put everything back together, and, you know, you get upset because it's just like, man, you know, like I told you so sort of attitude. Like,
sure.
You know,
you spent 14 months waiting.
Yeah, you spent 14 months waiting, and you know you're innocent. You know you didn't play the part that they said that you played. And it was just like, see, I told you. And you know, and it's just unfortunate. And you know, it took a big toll out of me. And I don't think, you know, part of me will never be the same. But I am happy that I had the attorney that I had the team that I had, and the support, and you know, I mean, I can't say enough about Scott even when he's not around. I speak so highly of him.
Well, that's very kind of you, but had we lost, that would have been the biggest bag of trash around.
You know what? I don't know if I really believe that, because, man, what I seen at court and what I seen at trial was night and day compared to what I had seen through all the preliminary process. So it was like, you know, I didn't see much. He didn't say much. He didn't object to much.
He didn't have to jump up and down. There wasn't anything to jump up and down about, right?
You know,
but once we got into court, it was like, game on.
It was game on.
We were talking about, you know, stepping out, your family being supportive and things like that. You said you nearly lost everything and you were able to rebuild. How long did it take to, first of all, get used to it? Did it feel real? I mean, here you were sitting in jail every day, maybe hanging out, watching TV, reading your case discovery. Yeah. All of a sudden now, bam, you're back in the world.
Right.
How was that adjustment? Even after, 14 months. We're not talking 14 years. We're talking 14 months.
It was difficult. It was very difficult, very emotional. Almost like failure to launch. It became very difficult in the beginning to get up and even take a shower. Sleeping in your own bed was uncomfortable. You know, putting back the pieces, it ruined my relationship that I had. I was in a relationship, 7-year relationship. It ruined that. It played, took a big toll on my family because they helped as much as they could, you know. So it drained everybody, and you almost got to come out and just like you kind of, you know, your family's there and they help you out, but it's almost like you got to pay them back, so to speak. And not in a monetary situation, but they want, you know,
they want you to show some appreciation for what they've done.
Their gratitude, and they don't understand why you're not your old self like you used to be. And so that was difficult to make the adjustments. I run a business. I came back, half my staff was gone. The other half was brand new. They had never met me. And so they're working at my place of business, but they don't even know who I am. And so that was difficult to make that sort of adjustment. And like I said, I came home and I was very angry because you know, part of it was like, why did I go through this? Why, you know, I still ask myself why. Why did this transpire? And you know, like I said, I lost my house, I lost half my business, I lost my relationship, and you know, you go through this why me, but then you have a moment of clarity. And you just says, you know what, it is what it is, and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you do it all over again. And I can be honest with you, man, I'm probably doing 10 times better than I was 10 years ago, you know. And I've always been fairly tenacious and pretty financially responsible and making pretty good decisions. And, you know, I can honestly say, you know, not to get on a spiritual kick, but I was blessed 10 times over since I've been home.
What did you learn through the process? Did you learn anything about friends, who you hang out with, taking that deep breath and let it go, anything like that?
Man, you have to keep your mouth shut. I don't care how. That is the biggest thing that is so hard to convey. I mean, people watch TV and watch First 48 and Crime Scene Investigator, and you don't understand how big it is. Guilty or innocent is that, and I just have to say it, the police are just simply not on your side. They're not. They're there to do a job. They're there to paint a picture. They're there to simply extort you for whatever it's worth. And I believe that, and I'm always going to stick by it. And I think the biggest thing is just remaining quiet and letting your team and your attorney do the talking for you is the biggest outcome. That had everything to do with it. I could have went in there and confessed my innocence, and I think that it would have changed the outcome of the case. That's the biggest thing that I probably learned in all this. And just in terms of friends and, your relationships, that definitely changes. But I think that also comes with just age and growing up and just growing pains. Some friends that definitely show me who was around and who had my back, and some of them, you have friends and family members that are equally envious of you. So I think it's important to change your circle as you get older and as you go through certain trials and tribulations.
Now, obviously, this case was in the news, the newspaper,
right,
at the time, and they covered everything. Did you ever get any retaliation or anybody publicly try to say something to you like, "Oh, there's Lee. He's he was charged with murder." Anything along those lines?
No, I was actually waiting for it. It's crazy because most of the people just felt that I was going to come home, even though I didn't feel that way. And, a lot of people were like, yeah, Lee, I knew, we knew you'd pull through. The ones that didn't believe that, I never seen or heard from them again. So there was no retaliation. It made it difficult at first because when you're dating, in the age of social media.
Oh, by the way, just happened to see you had this case pending. Anything you want to tell me about?
That was very embarrassing because, like, when you meet a girl or when you're dating or anything, first thing they want to do is just look you up on Facebook. Well,
quick Google search these days, huh?
Yeah, man, you get a Google search and all of a sudden it comes up with all this, this demonstrative information. Is just like it gets embarrassing. I can remember twice where I've had to explain myself when I didn't want to. It's just like, well, Lee, what is this about? I seen this on you, and you seem like a nice guy, but
by the way, anything you want to talk to me about?
Exactly.
Anything should I be worried?
And I've been in those situations.
How am I going to take you home and introduce you to mom?
Exactly, and that was tough. That was tough in the beginning. Now I really don't care as much. But your reputation is everything, and especially when you're well known in the community, it made it very difficult. I did lose some friends who didn't want to associate. One just happened to be an attorney, who actually I got the information of where I got Scott's information from, and he helped me through the process. But then after it was done, he was like, "I don't want anything else to do with you."
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, kind of wrapping up here. Obviously, you've been through, for lack of a better term, kind of to hell and back.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it wasn't one of those situations where someone's convicted and then it gets discovered later that they're the wrong person after they spend 10, 20, 30 years in prison.
Right.
The system, in my opinion, it worked the way it's supposed to work. And a lot of people don't have a whole lot of faith in the American judicial system, but I do.
Right.
For somebody that does it every day, done hundreds of jury trials,
right,
I truly believe the jury usually gets it right. They really do. Now, there's been a couple of cases I sit there and scratch my head thinking, what are you people thinking? But that's their prerogative. They're the jury. Okay,
right.
They, for whatever reason, they thought through it. And I'm never going to second guess them in that sense. Okay, because usually they go in my favor when they scratch my head. But you as an African American man who's been charged, literally, facing spending the rest of your life in prison, but found not guilty by an all-white jury in a very conservative jurisdiction. And I don't want to make it sound like that's the only thing that matters, but let's face it, there are biased people out there, there are racist people out there, but I think for the most part, most Americans are pretty fair, and they want to be treated, they want to treat people the way they want to be treated, and they're going to look at every person kind of going back to Martin Luther, you're not going to be judging you in the color of your skin, but the content of your character. And I truly believe that of most people. Are there going to be people on each end of the spectrum that it doesn't matter? I'm going to find him guilty or not guilty because he's an African American. I'm sure those people, but for the most part, those people get discovered in that process of voir dire, and we get them out of there. But how would you rate, or what's your faith in the judicial system? Obviously, it works for you, but there's cases where it doesn't work. How would you rate it? Say on a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh man, that's pretty tough. Just being African American, because so many of us are locked up, and even though I know a lot of them don't go to trial, I even look at the high profile cases like the O.J. Simpsons and the Bill Cosby as of late, and it's tough. It did work in my situation. I think there's of course a lot to improve still, and I think it does a lot of times come down to money, and not everybody's granted sort of the olive branch that you gave me when I ran out of money, and you still decided to stay on my case and represent me. That simply just doesn't happen. Yeah,
we were fortunate because there was a co-defendant whose case was ultimately dismissed after your trial.
Right.
But he had the public defender. So I was able to go to our Office of Alternative Defense Counsel and say, we're a month before trial.
Right.
He's going to get ADC counsel instead of waiting. So it's another 14 months of you waiting in custody. Will you appoint me so that I can finish this case? And they did. Right. And frankly, the less than exorbitant state rates wasn't that much. Obviously, I would have preferred you to pay me privately. But for the reality of it is, most people can't pay for a private homicide. That's just the reality because you have to leave no stone unturned, investigate, research, and you just never know.
Right.
Not to speak out of school, but we just had one, and it ultimately didn't even go to trial, and we're talking 6 figures.
Wow.
You have a team of attorneys, investigators, expert witnesses. It's a lot of money.
Right.
But you have to pay it.
Right.
To get the best representation, you can
get the best representation, and to get your story told.
Yeah.
It's going to cost, and that's the unfortunate thing about it. But I think I remember you telling me one time, Scott, when we were talking about politics, and you're like, Leland, with all the prejudices and the discrimination that go on in our judicial system, it's about as equal as it's going to get compared to any other place. Because I think at one point I was like, man, I'm going to move out the country. And it's just like, man, it doesn't get any better. This is about as equal as it's going to get. And it resonated with me, and I never forgot that. And I was just like, as much as I have, with the judicial system, I think this is probably the best one we're going to get so far.
There is a great quote, and I think it hits home. The American judicial system is absolutely terrible, but it's still better than anywhere else in the world. Right. And I truly, truly believe that, because from the start of the process, from charges filing to whether it's a guilty plea or there is a jury trial,
right,
the truth or a pretty darn close version of it comes out, and that's because of the adversarial system that we have in our court system. It's not perfect, but I still think it's better than anywhere else in the world.
Right.
So that being said,
right,
you didn't give me your rating of scale 1 to 10.
Well, just to elaborate, the reason why it's so difficult to rate it, Scott, is because when I still see, we having this big thing now in the media with Black Lives Matter, and a lot of police officers are shooting innocent or unarmed black men and women, and then they go to court. And I know a lot of times, you mentioned a few times, the jury always gets it right, but a lot of times these people aren't even brought up on charges. And so it's just like, how fair is it? Because, we're getting killed in the street here, and it's judicially, it's not bouncing in our favor. And I think if police officers were being held accountable more in court, that it would sort of, I would hope that it would deter a lot of the innocent shootings that have been going on.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there was that officer in South Carolina that was on videotape where they shot the guy as he's running away in the back.
Right.
And the jury hung, I think, in the state court,
hung,
but he
right.
took a deal in the federal court because he probably wasn't going to get that same jury pool, the local neighborhood one.
Right.
So I agree. You know, it's like most professions. Most people, I think, are going to show up and do the right job.
Right.
The problem with the police is if there's a bad apple,
Yeah.
they never get rid of that bad apple. They
Right.
defend it because if we go after the bad apple, then they may have to get rid of a guy who maybe not be a bad apple, but maybe has a little bit of a bruise on him.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they can't hold themselves to a higher standard as a police officer, they should go.
Right.
So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Difficult to rate. For me, I give it a 10 because I'm home.
Because it worked for you.
Because it worked for me.
But
but on a larger scale, just in America, it's difficult to scale because I still see a lot of injustices going on. And but for me, I mean, 1 to 10, it worked as a 10. My team, the way things have transpired, the way things opened up, and I'm home at the end of the day, and I feel like I should be. And I can't speak any other. I can't. When I talked to Scott and the Reisch law firm, and everybody was so attentive, and everybody was available, and everybody played their position and their role, and it worked. It worked. And I hope that it continues to work for those who are less fortunate.
Once again, Leland, I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
You're, I guess the first real guest for our podcast, voir dire. But you will be the first, and we'll put this out here. It'll be on the website, voirdire.com,
Okay.
the ReischLawFirm.com, ScottReisch.com on YouTube. So
Okay.
this will be on as well. So subscribe,
I will.
and watch it many, many times, all right?
Absolutely. I want to see how this turns out, and I wish you all the best and your continued success, and I hope the podcast continues to flourishes.
All right.
Flourishes, and have me back, man.
I will.
Yeah,
We
have
got a
me
lot
back.
to talk about.
Yeah.
We can talk about all kinds of stuff.
We can talk about politics, man. We can talk about anything.
Sounds good to me.
Broncos.
Let's do it. The Broncos. Go Broncos.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Leland.
Thank you.